minutes of that tutorial. I'm also going to start my timer to make sure I don't go over time on that. Okay, so for 4DS students, I'm going to scroll down now to remote learning assignments. I'm going to open both the instruction document for the tutorial and the PDF of all the code, so I don't have to necessarily type it all. So the PDF of all the code and the instruction document. And I'm going to get them caught up to where we left off. So we left off we started the tutorial itself by adding in some comments. We then went to this UI view, which was already built for us, and we had to add in some comments into this to make it work. Okay, a lot of the code was already done. And then we went to the meme class and we added in some comments for the meme class, and we talked about it a little bit. And the dialogues class, which again, we just added in some comments, and the images class. So really, we've been just adding comments to code to this point forward in the tutorial. So you can see that right here in the instructions. It said you start by downloading the tutorial, so you're not starting from nothing. It has most of the code done. Then you're going to go to UI view, you're going to add this comment. You're going to go to meme, you're going to add this comment. You're going to go to dialogues, you add this comment. You're going to go to images. This was the last one we worked on. And you're going to add this comment. It's easier to do this if you open the PDF of all the code, because you can literally copy and paste right out of the PDF. Now, sometimes when you copy paste though, actually often when you copy paste, you're going to have to clean that up afterwards because it's not going to paste in perfectly. So yes, we did the intro one, the UI view one, the meme one, and the dialogues, and we finished yesterday with the one called images. So we're going to start there today. So having finished images, okay, we'll go from there today. But I wanted to just take a pause here for a second and talk about the last two classes that we did, dialogues and images. So if you read the comments and listened to what I said yesterday, these two classes are part of a set of code that could be reusable in lots of different programs. So if you are going to say, have fun and experiment over the summer and make something cool like a game or something, or even during the final project experience time coming up in the next couple of weeks, if you're going to experiment with code, or even if you're going to go on into computer science beyond high school, like we talked a little bit about yesterday, it might be that some of this code could be useful to you. So I wanted to kind of prove that to you guys today. So what I did is I made a little project, just a little sample project right here. And I just made a user interface by using the designer. That's what you see right here. And in that user interface, I just stuck one single J label. And in that J label, I placed an icon, a picture of a cat. And there it is. Now, one of the things you realize about the way the designer works in NetBeans, which is a little more limited to the designer in Visual Studio, is you can place an image in there. And by the way, that image is sitting on my desktop right now. There it is. I put it in there, that sample project image. If I stretch out the J label, it doesn't stretch out the image. This is something that's easily accomplished in Visual Studio because you can set a property to do that, but there is no property to do that with a J label. So it's a limitation of the J label. Now, the reason that happens is, remember, Java and NetBeans can run on multiple platforms, whether it's a Mac or a PC or even other platforms beyond that. So it's a little more tricky to figure out how I can stretch out an image on a Mac versus a PC. It's not as simple. Whereas Visual Studio is only running on a PC running Microsoft Windows. So it knows how to stretch that image out because it doesn't have to deal with all the different variations there. But in order to accomplish that, I wrote a little class called images, which has only one method in it. And here's what the method does. It resizes the image inside a label to match the size of the label. So what I've done is in my code right here, I made a call to that. I said, you know what? Resize JLabel1 to fit that container. by using the images class. Okay, so I did that, and I'll show you how that looks in a second. But I also want to show you some of the stuff from the dialogues class. And here I'm going to actually use the Navigator a little bit. You know, the Navigator. Because in the Navigator, you can see all these different methods that are available in the Navigator class to do stuff, to open files, to output, to input, and stuff like that. So what I decided to do was test those as well. So I'm going to make a call to input, input integer, input double, play again, yes, no, choices, buttons, open file, save file, and just show you the result of what these things do. Okay? So in this little sample code, which I'm just going to slowly scroll through, because if you wanted to do this, right, you could pause the video right here, and you could experiment with this images class and this dialogues class as part of some of the stuff you could use it for. And now I'm going to run this little sample program to show you that what we're doing in the tutorial could have an effect somewhere else. So here you can see I'm inputting a string and I'm using that same image as part of the input dialog box, which we've already seen. Inputting an integer, inputting a double, making a choice between some choices here, seeing how I could make a little play again feature, having something like this with a little drop down, which might be nice in some program I'm making. Having something like this where I actually get to, instead of having a drop down, having it write the names on the buttons, right? So instead of saying just yes or no, I could say pick a color, red, green, blue, or something like that. Okay. Having a dialog box which actually allows me to open a file, like I see in, say, Microsoft Windows sometimes, and save a file. So that would show you the result of me running that code, right? Like it actually selected those files and it remembered which options I chose and which numbers I typed in there. And then it brings up the actual JFrame and it actually stretched the image to match the frame, which I distorted it on purpose so that it would show you that it matches the frame. Now I'm also going to do it one more time, and you're going to notice it looks a little bit different. But I'll get to why it's looking a little different in a second. You can see the dialog boxes look a little different. And even the JFrame looks a little different. And that's because when you use the designer, if I don't use the designer and I just make my user interface visible, it does that. But if you actually use the visual designer, there's a piece of code that the designer uses, this tricky piece of code here, to set what's called the look and feel of it. And it uses this style called the Nimbus style. So it's yet another sort of Java feature you could experiment with. That's built into the designer. So I added this line of code, okay? If I took that line of code out and ran it, it would just use that Nimbus style, which some of you might want to experiment with to kind of get a feel for how you can modify these visual things in Java. Okay, because you're in the grade 12 computer science class, you might want to now start experimenting beyond what I can teach in class. And this is yet another thing you could use this sort of tutorial code for doing. Okay, but now we need to refocus back on the tutorial. So the next thing we're going to do after images, so you can see here in our instructions, is we're now going to go to the class called numbers and add an explanation comment. Okay, so we're done with images. I'm now going to open up numbers to add a comment. And again, it's just the explanation comment. The rest of the code is fine. So before I add it, if I wanted to, I could actually look at what the methods are in the numbers class. Oh, okay. So there's methods to generate a random Boolean, okay, but also a random integer and a random double. But when I generate a random integer, it'll be between two integers, and same with double. How about generating arrays, a random array of integers, a random array of Booleans? Well, that's pretty cool. what else is available to me? Well, not only arrays of random integers, but you can see further down is to generate a random linked list of integers. So as we get into linked lists, maybe you could use this numbers class to experiment with linked lists, like make a random linked list of integers or doubles. So these are methods that are already there for you if you want to use them in the future. But then there's other little methods that work with numbers, like rounding numbers off, something that can actually be a little tricky. But how could I round off a number to a certain number of decimal places? Well, I could just use this method right in this class to do that. And again, maybe you're working on a project where that's something you need to do. Is it an even number? That might be a useful method. Is it even an integer? Is it even a double? Is it in range between two numbers? These are all built-in methods as part of the numbers class. So as I add my comment for the numbers class, I'm going to scroll down on that PDF to numbers, grab that explanation comment, and copy and paste it over. And then I'm going to use Alt-Shift-F after I selected it to automatically format the code as well. Wasn't a big deal here, but just a reminder of that. Okay, that's done now. So now back to the instructions. So now numbers is done here on page 3. Now I'm going to do Filehandler, okay? And Filehandler is the same thing. I'm going to have to add the explanation comment. So let's open up Filehandler. Okay, and just before I add the explanation comment, let's take a quick look at some of its methods. So Filehandler is a class that I wanted to include because we don't have time to study this as a full unit. If you take computer science IB in grade 12, you do study this as a full unit. And sometimes in 40S, if I have time, I can teach it, but I wanted you to at least have exposure to it. The ability to save data to a file so that the next time you start a program, it remembers some of the information from before. So there are methods in this class to open a file and save a file, okay? But you need, in order to open a file, you need to know what is the name of the file. So you can see here it has a parameter, the file name, or this thing called a file object, which is another object, not one that you create, but one that you can import into Java that automatically deals with files. But then there's other variations, like open an entire array from a file, open an entire linked list from a file, open an object of type T. So that's that idea of a generic object. So it can open anything and it can save generics as well. So there's a lot more detail there into these opening and saving of stuff. But I'm not going to go through all of those details. That's something that is something you could potentially tap into if you wanted to. Let's just go and get that comment. So I'm going to scroll down past numbers. So I have to scroll for a little while here. So I'm on to page 22, 23. Looks like this is Filehandler. So Filehandler starts on page 26 of that PDF. That's where I can grab that explanation comment, copy it, and paste it. And Alt-Shift-F, clean it up. So this Filehandler class is an example of a class that would have been developed in together if we had time to do it in a unit I usually call permanent storage. It uses a whole bunch of methods that you can scroll through and look at to essentially save stuff to a file. But you'll notice it uses stuff like generics. So that's why that advanced classes unit was so important. So that when you look at this code, you have an idea of a little bit what's going on there. But you can look through the different methods. Some of this stuff, though, might be new. The try catch block. You haven't seen that before. So that might be more of the reason why, if you wanted to look into file handling in more detail than just this tutorial, you would do what I mentioned yesterday. You would go into the extra content of the 40S course. And from that extra content, you could look at permanent storage in more detail, okay? If you realize that is something that your program would need, you could read through a presentation. You could watch and look at another example. You could even potentially do an assignment to sharpen your skills. Or you could just look at a quick cheat sheet of the unit to kind of get a feel for what it means by permanent storage and what these things do. All of that stuff is available to you if you needed it. Okay, so now that Filehandler's done, it now says, after completing this, we're going to now go to UI Controller. It says you are responsible for adding the explanation comment to UI Controller next. We've got 4 minutes left, so we're going to easily take care of this as well. So now I'm going to save Filehandler. And I saved numbers. And now I'm going to open UI Controller to get ready to work on that one. So here's what we've done so far. We started with the CS40 tutorial. We worked on UI view. We worked on meme, dialogues, images, numbers, Filehandler, and now we're about to work on UI Controller. We're about to add the comment for UI Controller. So we've already finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Java classes are already done. They're all done. There's nothing else we need to do for our tutorial other than the stuff that we've been doing. Okay? So that's good news. There is only a few more left to work on, but there is a lot of learning that you need to do. So it's a reminder, you also want to read this a little bit as you put this comments and stuff in there. Also, something we forgot to do that we did yesterday is you need to update the comment in this so that it doesn't show that I am the author of these particular classes, but that you are the author and that you've been working on this, for example, the numbers class on June the 4th. And you're going to put your name in there. And you worked on the Filehandler class on June the 4th. And this one, I'm going to have to do it in 2 parts. So there's a little bit of cleanup you need to do there. And UI Controller class, the one we're about to start. I'm going to put my comment in there. So a reminder that the UI Controller controls the user interface that we had back up here. That the user interface, in other words, what we call the view of what the user looks at, they view the user interface right here. And then the controller is really, again, it's controlling their view. Okay, it's controlling what they look at and how they interact with it. So in other words, you can think of it as a place where all the logic goes. For those of you who like gaming, you might also want to call this class the engine that's essentially driving the view. Okay, so this is our UI controller, and it is connected to our UI view. This is a type of programming paradigm or thought process that you can look into in much higher level computer science coursework, not to mention if you ever work in the computer science industry, that this is something you're going to be kind of expected to start to understand. So why not here in high school start down that path a little bit? Okay, so we got to go get that comment for the UI controller. Okay, so let's go to our PDF and we'll scroll through Filehandler and all the code that Filehandler had. We're in the last minute of this, so this will be the last thing we'll be doing today. It's just adding in that comment. So it looks like we're on to page 37 before we start the UI controller. So if you're wondering, I'm starting this on page 37 of the PDF. You can hear the countdown in the background. I'm going to grab that explanation comment, copy it, and clean it up. So on Monday, we will continue this tutorial, and I will read that to you as a starting point. We'll take a look at the UI controller class, and then from there, the next set of our instructions for this tutorial is to then go on and deal with the node class, which means now we're going to get right into the linked list collections part of this. And this one you will have to actually add code to, not just comments. And that's where we'll pick up the tutorial next week. All right, I'm going to stop the recording here in a second, but you know what? I think I'm going to let the recording roll for a minute or two, because I think I'm going to add to the recording the bad joke of the week, because it's possible that some of the 30th students connected in as well. And if they didn't, then they can watch the end of this video. All right, everybody, I'm going to just do a speaker check. So from now, once I'm finished the joke, from now until the end of this period, I'll be on Teams for any questions, issues, or concerns you guys have, or just in general to talk over Teams if you want to just talk. And if you need extra help, you can also connect at 3 o'clock today, or you can send me an email. But now it's time. Bad jokes of the week are by definition bad, not repeated, not explained. If you don't like it, get it or hear it. It's not my fault. And you can disconnect from Teams right now if you don't want to hear it. So two buddies go fishing. They go on they're from a small town, and they went on a fishing trip, and they're out in the woods. It's been a long day of fishing. They've been fishing at the side of a river. They're not in a boat. They walked into the woods, went fishing, and one of the guys is really tired. So he decides to sit down on a tree stump. And as he sits down, what he doesn't notice, that curled up on the tree stump was a rattlesnake. And the rattlesnake rears up and bites this guy right in the middle of his bum, like right in the middle. And the guy keels over, starts yelling, "Ah, I just got bit by a rattlesnake. I've got poisoned. I'm gonna die." He says to his buddy, "You need to run into town and get the doctor, or I'm gonna die." So his buddy starts running through the woods back to the small town they came from. And there's one medical clinic in the town and one doctor. So he runs all the way back to town, runs into the medical clinic, busts into the medical clinic and says, "Doctor, doctor, you need to help me. My buddy just got bit by a rattlesnake right in the middle of his bum, and he's going to die from the poison." The doctor says, "Oh my gosh." And what he notices is the doctor is right in the middle of delivering a baby. And the doctor says that. He says, "I'm right in the middle of delivering a baby. I can't leave. I'm sorry. I can't leave this woman and her baby right now. But I can tell you what to do to save your buddy. Here's what you need to do. You need to take out your hunting knife, and you need to make an incision and cut away all the skin around the wound in the center of his bum. Cut the skin away. Then what you need to do is you need to get your face right up in there, and you need to suck out all the poison out of that wound that you just cut open. Get your face right in there in the center of his bum and suck out all the poison. And then he'll live because all the poison will be removed from his system. Suck it out, spit it out, right out of the center of his bum, and your buddy will live." "Got it?" He goes, "I got it." So then he runs all the way back through town, through the woods, back to his buddy who's still laying there beside the tree stump. His buddy says, "Ah, where's the doctor?" The guy says, "The doctor couldn't come." He says, "But he told me what to do." The guy says, "Ah, good. What should I do?" His buddy says, "Nothing. You're going to die." Have a good weekend for those of you leaving right now. And enjoy your weekend. It's going to be hot. And I'll see you guys on Teams on Monday. And for those who need help, stay on the line right now. Bye, everybody.